Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Dempker. Thanks for joining us for our 23rd episode here of our podcast, which we still haven't named. But this is a session where we like to just pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. We usually cover things relating to personal development, professional development, organizational change, and a little bit of philosophy, those kind of topics. And so thanks for joining us for another one. Toby, thanks for joining me for another one of these conversations. Looking forward to today's session.
Thanks for having me for the 23rd time. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, we do these every 2 weeks, and they accumulate. So it's great. It's been fun so far. So, a few episodes ago, we started talking about afterthoughts from our previous episode. But before we get to that, I don't know how much you listened to our other episodes, but I was having a listen to the last one we recorded. And, sometimes I realize I don't finish my thoughts. Like you were telling me about you'd been having a conversation with your son about the stories we tell, the 2 episodes ago. And I was asking you how old he is, and you said 10, and I said, oh, that's a good age. But what I meant to say was, that's a good age for, to start talking about, some philosophy and some inner reflection and stuff. Because, as you kind of approach 11, that's when you start, making choices more on rational rather than imitation and stuff. So anyway, so it's funny to listen to yourself and go, well, it was on the inside, but I didn't fully express myself on the outside. So
Yeah, sure.
if I'm not finishing my thought, please, feel free to prompt me and ask me to clarify.
Yeah, well, it's the same. I guess that's really common, but that's and that's an important thing to pick up on coaching. But we do it as well, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, to get to our afterthoughts, I had. Did you have any afterthoughts to our topic on cooperation or cooperativeness, as you coined the phrase, or maybe?
Well, yeah, actually a little bit. And on that, I mean, I thought about why, because when I'm thinking about the theme or the subject, I'm thinking about it in Swedish, and then there's a different term for it. So I was thinking maybe people think it's really weird when we talk about cooperativeness, and what does that mean? So I don't know if we were really clear about that, but so just to rephrase that a little bit. So what I'm thinking about is really, thinking about how do we create circumstances to create opportunities to cooperate better, and that's why I refer to it as cooperativeness. The afterthoughts are really that it's been popping up over and over again in different kind of situations and topics that I've been talking about. If it's when I'm teaching or in different facilitation groups. But it's just such a theme, it pops up everywhere, and I guess it's always been around me. So it's really nice to have these conversations where you can frame a little bit about what you're thinking about and try to just conceptualize it a little bit. That's been very helpful for me. So it's all around me all the time, and I just need to be a little bit more crisp about the ideas and what it means. To me and to others. Yeah.
Well, as a word, I find the English language evolves. All languages do, and I think that there's a lot of isms and like the Ness. I don't know if words like. Openness has been around for a long time. Like when you think of the big 5 personality traits, but I find people are creating new words, or words are evolving anyway. So I don't think that's a big deal. But I think the two sort of my afterthoughts from last time. The one is that cooperativeness is really it's really the antidote to a lot of the polarization we're seeing in the world, and looking for having empathy and looking for ways how to find common solutions rather than it's the whole looking for what you are for rather than what you're against and finding commonality there. I think that's a really important point that we need more of. instead of a lot of the media that pits us against each other and talks about the conflict and so on. I mean, that's what grabs attention. But I think the really big thing that I thought a lot about after, because I had actually intended to bring it up in our conversation, and we just, as our conversations kind of do, they got have a life of their own. But the one thing we didn't talk about in terms of cooperation or the downsides of cooperativeness is sort of there is a flip side to it, and it goes by many names: corruption, nepotism, favoritism. All of these things are also forms of cooperation that are actually detrimental. So I think it's important, because sometimes it seems very harmless, but when you are, tribalism that causes. It's interesting in Italy, and they have this term famiglia, and they don't. It's not even necessarily referring to the immediate family. It's anyone in sort of your closer circle, and so people will do favors, help each other out and stuff. But sometimes it's at the disadvantage of other people. And so I think it's just important. I think Sweden does such a great job of this, of making sure that there isn't so much. Corruption sounds very harsh, but even favoritism and giving your buddy an advantage over someone else who may have something more to offer or whatever. So I think it's just important to be aware of that. But so cooperation has its flip side, and I think that's just important to be aware of. So I wanted to raise that today.
Okay, so I don't want to go on too long about this, but yeah, sure. I mean, okay, Sweden, there's less corruption here than in say China, but it always exists, and favorism and different kind of biases. If it's with awareness or not, that's a different thing. But I hear what you're saying. I would disagree though, because according to my own definition, my view of it is, if it's true cooperativeness, if that's what we call it, then if you look at it from a psychological safety point of view, the psychological safety is mature enough. So if those kind of things would happen, that would be raised in this situation. So that you have that amount of transparency and openness to discuss things that you think is unfair or unethical or that you don't agree with. And I think that would be one of the key components for me, that if you have that transparency and openness, you can discuss anything, and that would be a real fundament to create this kind of cooperation that we're looking for. I do agree that it exists everywhere, but in my definition to what I'm thinking about cooperativeness, it's not really, it shouldn't be there, at least.
Yeah, and I think that for the most part, excuse me for a second.
Oh, bless you.
Just needed to sneeze there. I'm having some sneezing fits this morning. Yeah, I think that for the most part, cooperation is absolutely a very beneficial thing. And I was just raising that as a matter of people being aware of those times when it's maybe you couldn't even call it cooperation. It's more favoritism, and it's not adding value to the situation or to the organization or to your community or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, it was more a matter of awareness, but I think the vast majority of the time, or when it's working properly, you're right. When it's working properly, then being cooperative or cooperation is something that is to everybody's benefit. It's looking for the win-win, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, those were my afterthoughts. So today it's my turn to come up with a topic, and this is something that's been on top of my mind. I just posted a blog about it on the weekend. I've been thinking about it a lot over the last number of years. It's really guided my choices, some of the projects I want to take on, the kind of work that I'm doing. But really in the last couple of months, it's been on my mind a lot, and that's the matter of adding value. So for me, adding value is a lot about, well, it's about the contribution that you make. It's for me, it's a really good measurement for the choices that you're trying to make in life. So a lot of people look at, where they want to get with their careers, what they want, what they can get. My belief is that, you will feel more happier and more fulfilled when you look at things in terms of what can I contribute. That it ties into the cooperation piece. If I'm part of something cooperating, I want to be able to, if I can feel really good about myself if I'm adding value to the world, to a work project, to anything, to my relationships. So that's one component of it. And then also the things that we're letting into our life, how are they adding value to us? There's, this is not a judgment, but of how we spend our time. It's just a matter of reflection to go, we ask ourselves a lot, why am I even doing this? What, and it's not just about how does it benefit me, but we ask ourselves these things about why do I put up with this, or why do I do this? Because they're not actually adding any value to our life. And so if we can measure things in terms of how we can add value to others, to the projects we're working on, to the relationships we're in, and also ask ourselves, well, how are the things that we're committing time to adding value to our lives, right? The people that you visit out of obligation, how is that adding value to either of you? And I'm not talking about, if you have someone elderly who's in an old folks home, for example, and you go, well, I'm doing it for them. It's not, no, when you give of yourself, you're always still adding value to yourself. I have a certain amount of people that I will coach for free. And to some people that may seem like a very one-way transaction, but I get something out of every coaching session that I do, or every person that I coach. I learn something, a little something new, or I'm reminded of something. So it enhances my life, and when I'm doing things that add value, that enhances hopefully the lives of others, or enhances a project or organization, and so on. So just like, it goes back to the very first talk that we had, where we talked about purpose. And, why do I, I see a lot of coaches, for example, but a lot of people in all industries who will post things on Facebook or LinkedIn, or, any of these different media channels, and they'll create content because they're trying to draw attention to their, to what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I've been writing a blog for, on and off for more than 10 years. I'll go through phases. If I'm not feeling inspired, I'll take a break, but I've been writing that for numerous reasons. It adds value to me. It helps me kind of organize my thoughts. It challenges me to kind of refine my thinking, my beliefs, my theories. And hopefully it adds value to other people who are going to read it. So I have yet to have one person, go, hey, I read your blog and I'd like to sign up for some coaching. I've yet to have one person. And the same goes, we've our 22 episodes up to now. I've had not one person that's come to me and said, oh, I saw your podcast and I want to sign up. So I think you and I both agree that's not the reason we commit the time to talk about these subjects. But we both, having these conversations adds value for me. I assume it does the same for you, or you wouldn't do it. And then hopefully, we aspire to add value to other people's lives by sharing hopefully some information maybe they haven't thought of, or it reinforces ideas, or it triggers people to take action, be motivated, so on. So I think that's in the greater scope of things. That's what I'm talking about in terms of adding value. And I think it's a really good measure of how we're spending our time and living our lives. So what are your thoughts?
Interesting. I mean, I get a bit curious about how do you view that of adding value to yourself or to others, and what's the difference there? The reason I ask this is that I have conversations with myself and with people around me quite often about what it means to be selfish, and that I have this it's not my idea, but I have this belief that you need to be kind to yourself first, before you can sort of not be kind, but you'll love yourself, and it's easier to love others, and you'll have more energy and more spare time to contribute or to do good things to others, adding value to others' lives. But for me, I think it's really important. That can sound a bit selfish, but to add value to yourself first. So what is important for you? How can you create that kind of space and energy? And then hopefully that will have a spillover effect to others as well, adding value to others. And I don't know if that sounds selfish, but I believe that it's really important. If you're just giving away to others and sort of neglecting yourself, maybe it doesn't have to be that way either. But I think that happens a lot. That you think that when you're talking about contributing to others and doing kind of voluntarily work or stuff like that, you always have to give to others before you give to yourself, or take care of others before you take care of. And from a sustainability point of view, I see a real problem there. So I guess what I'm saying is that, sure, adding value, great, but my starting point would be, okay, so how do you add value to yourself? What's important to you? And then but also I really do agree that it's super important, and I think I realize this more and more, the importance of creating or developing a kind of community awareness of, how can you contribute to things around you from a leadership perspective, or just from a humanitarian perspective. I think it's obviously it's very important.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that topic of selfishness. And this is, I think you bring up a really important point that I hadn't thought would come up in our conversation. But there is this kind of common belief about, to be selfless, right? And I think that's a bit strange, because it's like saying the self doesn't have any value. I think your perspective and your experience in life has a lot of value, so you shouldn't neglect the self, right? So selflessness, I don't think, is necessarily a really positive thing. Adding value, making sure that you're not how do you define selfish? I mean, for me, I think the most selfish people are unhappy people. Unhappy people are a burden to others. They tend to not be cooperative. They tend to look out on, it's finding your happiness at the expense of others, rather than finding your happiness despite the conditions around you, right? Finding an internal sense of fulfillment and happiness, rather than those, relying on people around you. So if you're a burden on other people because of things that you could change, I think that is selfish. But I've been using the old, and it gets used a lot now, but the old kind of metaphor of the airplane. When you get onto the airplane, the flight attendant will say, in case of emergency, in the unlikely case of loss of cabin pressure, please place your own mask on yourself before helping children and people around you. And I think that's a good metaphor for life, because if you're not making sure that you are maybe not the best version of yourself, but at least you are at a level that you can contribute to others, you're not doing anybody a favor, right? So that's why I think I absolutely agree. I think taking care of yourself is extremely important. Making sure that you're in the best position to give to others is the best thing you can do, and is actually a very unselfish thing to do, right?
Yeah, if you put it in that perspective, for sure, yeah. But it takes a lot of awareness, and and that that's where this could bring us then. So how do you add value both to yourself then first, but what brings value to others as well? But maybe should we start from that self perspective then? So.
I think I think it's always we always do things. You may think that, well, I'm doing this for others, and if you're approaching life in that way, I think it's helpful to kind of reevaluate, because no matter what you do, you will get something in return. The more you give, the more you get. I really believe in that, and so that's why When I think about things where you're just you're spending time in order to get a financial reward, right? Rather than looking at what's the contribution that I'm actually making, then also the only thing that's contributing to your life is a financial reward. There's nothing else. And that's fairly, I think, more and more, we've talked before about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you look at, once your sort of food and shelter is taken care of, that we have a lot of other emotional needs that need to be fulfilled, and having a sense of purpose is very much tied to the ways we add value to everything around us and to ourselves. And even just the act of adding value to other people, like, I foster dogs. Since my dog died last year, I've been fostering rescues, right? And people will, once in a while, people go, "Oh, that's so great that you do that, that you're giving that way." But I get a ton out of that. I get something, it adds an immense amount of, not only is there a level of satisfaction in it, but I mean, the dogs force me to get out in the morning, and just seeing them come from these frightened creatures off this van from Romania, and then see them opening up and coming into their own, and just watching them progress in just a very short time after living in poor conditions. That is very fulfilling to me. That adds value to my life, right? And other people may look at it as it's you're giving of yourself, but there's lots of ways that we can give and also add value to our own lives. And that's the thing that I want to point to. And I guess another story, and I don't want to hog the conversation here, but
No.
I recently kind of wrapped up a project, not because the client was unhappy with me, not because I didn't love the people in the organization and the type of work, but I'd gotten to a point where, as much as they were happy to pay me, I didn't feel like I was fully adding value to the project. So I voluntarily said, and it's a very privileged thing. It's not like, wow, how great am I? It's a very, like, I'm really lucky that I'm in a financial position that I can say no to work. But and I'm repeating myself because I wrote this in my blog. But this thing. And this is a result of me really the last couple of months being very focused on this question of adding value, right? So I hope that kind of points. Look, words are. I like how Eckhart Tolle talks about how words are only pointers. They're only like these things that point to what you're trying to talk about. So I think that's what this conversation does. We talk about terms, and then hopefully the context we give it points to what we really mean. So yeah, that story I think points to how I've been very much, maybe a little self-involved, but I've been really reflecting over the last few years, but very much in the last couple months on how can I add more value to those around me, to the people I interact with, and also to myself. Because if I just keep doing the things that I know I can do and I know I can get paid for, I'm not challenging myself. So I just want to make sure that there's enough diversity in my life. We talk about diversity and inclusion, and this is exactly the thing. We want diverse ideas in organizations, and you also want diverse experiences in your life. And if you stay in your comfort zone, you will stop growing. And for me, growth is the main purpose to my life. Growth, continue to grow and evolve. So yeah, does that point in the direction of how I mean it when I talk about adding value?
I guess it does. I mean, it depends on, as you always say, you never know where these conversations are going to take us. What I'm hearing, or what I'm thinking when I'm hearing it is, because we talked about values already. But if we think about adding value, to have that clarity about what your values are. And there is a term called terminal values, and then you have instrumental values to sort of reach for that. And I'm just thinking, if I mean, how do you know? How do you know if this is adding value to yourself or to others? I mean, that's the we're always talking about this, the importance of self-awareness, and where do we go with that? But so one way to think about it for me is to really think about, okay, so what are my terminal values? So, and the way that I think about that is, okay, so when I'm, and something that I actually think about quite a lot, it's these famous stories of what people are saying on their deathbed when they're really close to the end of their lives. What do they look back on, and what do they appreciate, and what do they regret? I think that's very inspiring to think about. How do you prioritize, what will in the end bring value to your life? But and that's sort of conceptualize this idea about the terminal value. So what's important for you in the end? What's the sort of the end game, if you want to call it that? So is it about happiness or kindness or contribution, or these kind of things? But that helps me to define purpose, as we've talked about before as well, and goal. But then to think about, okay, so how could I add value to that? And that would be through, in that case, through any kind of instrumental value. So instrumental values are values that are connected to behaviors that I'm demonstrating in that direction. So maybe it's about I don't know, being staying positive, or being generous, or contributing what you can, or whatever it might be, but more behavior behavior-like values that are supporting your terminal values. And by doing that, kind of thinking about, okay, so what should I be spending time on? What's important for me? And then how does that have an effect on others?
That's exactly the point I was trying to get to, was, how am I spending my time? But just to loop back to the story I was telling about my situation, and again, I think you bring up a really important point. It's important to reflect on, is my inner critic too active right now? Because I'm sure that was part of it, right? Maybe I was being overly critical on myself, but it was not just the value I was adding to an organization. It's also, is the work that I'm doing right now adding value to me? So it certainly wasn't some selfless act. It was me recognizing that. So because from now until the new year, I'm gonna, I'm still have a few other things going on, but I'm gonna take some time off to reflect, to do some writing. I really feel like I've neglected my writing. And really just to reorient myself, because there's a lot of great projects coming up for next year that have now sort of just in the last couple of weeks come to fruition. So that's really great. So I just want to clarify that it's not like it's always a two-way street. So adding value. Making these decisions that I'm trying to make, I try to look at it in both ways. But being self-reflective enough to go, am I just being too self-critical? Because what you point to there is something that I've heard from, people in different businesses, and especially bigger organizations, where they have people straight out of university come into their organization, and after 3 months, they're like, I don't know if I'm a good fit here. I don't feel like I'm making an impact, right? And so especially younger people who are just full of this knowledge that they've learned at university, or maybe they were at a startup and now they're moving into another organization, and they just feel like they've learned so much. And if they don't see the results in a short period, or they don't feel like they're making a contribution, all of a sudden there's a sense of not adding value. And I think it's important to keep that in context and in perspective. And in some cases it is, you are very hard on yourself. There are a few people who are deluded in themselves, or they're trying to compensate for their insecurity by being sort of overly confident. But for the most part, I think a lot of us have this strong inner critic, or this sense of, I've heard, I have clients bring up, I think maybe I have imposter syndrome, or, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot of that out there, and I think it's important to keep it in balance. So asking yourself if you're adding value and if it's adding value back in your life is an important question to ask. But I think your point is valid to say, make sure you're not setting the bar too high, right? You may not know all the ways that you're contributing. So maybe you feel it's a one-way street and you're just getting everything back, but not giving, you're getting a lot, but you're not giving enough back. You may not know the ways that you impact other people. So I think that's I know I'm rambling on it, but it was a good point that you made.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm glad you thought so. I'm also just thinking about, because you mentioned the word balance, and for me that's something that every time I hear that word, it really strikes me, because it's something that I value very, very much. I think it's super important for me, and I think about that a lot. And if you look at, for example, something that I guess you use a lot, the wheel of life in coaching, so looking at, how do I make sure that I have a certain amount of balance here? And that's, for me, that's also a way of thinking about what adds value to my life right now, in this moment. It might not be that I have to focus on this all the time, but it's sort of rebalancing to make sure that I'm in the shape that I want to be. I guess in a lot of different ways, I think about that a lot. I need to do some kind of adjustments here, because I'm feeling that I'm not, I don't know, maybe I'm not content, or just not really satisfied with the situation I'm in at a certain moment, and then trying to make a little bit of a shift. But also that awareness of, what I'm doing right now, maybe it's not adding a lot of value to me right now, but I just need to get through this, and then I can sort of rebalance. So it's also about those kind of perspectives. I mean, from a sustainability point of view, again, if you're always sort of catching up, then that's probably a pretty bad sign. But if you know that, okay, now I'm going through a tough patch here of 2 weeks, and maybe I feel like that doesn't add value, but when I'm done with this, I can reshift a little bit and refine that balance. I'll be in a better shape again. For me, that's a lot of how I think about it.
Yeah, and it's not always, growth and progress is not always this curve upward, right? You have these peaks and valleys, and I think sometimes it's hard to keep in perspective how far you've come, and that's why sort of when I do I usually start a lot of the coaching work with the wheel of life, so that we can measure where are you at right now, and well, it helps define the what's important to you. So I don't have, some people use a wheel of life that has kind of preset categories, and I don't like to do that. I like people to evaluate their situation based on their own definitions or their own words that they use to sort of categorize the areas of their life. But I think that's really important to then hold on to that, and in 6 months, in 12 months, in 3 years even, have another look at that and go, this is the way my life looked. This was sort of the map of what my life was, and then you can kind of recognize how far you've come. And so, I think, like you say, that having that balance of what am I giving, and what am I filling my own life with is a really important one to think about. And for a while there, I guess I was really focused on what am I giving, and I think it's kind of just the nature of who I am that I think in terms of a lot about what am I. For a long time, it was what am I achieving, and I think that a lot of people are on a career path and they're looking at the salary they should be on, the title they want to have, and then the kind of responsibilities that come with that role or whatever. But it just, they have this idea of how moving up the hierarchy, or what are the steps to the ladder. And some of the people that come to me for coaching will say, I've ticked all those boxes. I've progressed up that ladder that society said that I should be progressing up. You know, it'll be some people they'll have a partner and family, so they'll have done a lot of those things that society says these are the things that will make you fulfilled and happy and so on. So it'll be, you know, people will come and say, I went to university, I graduated, I got a good job, I met a partner, you know, and they have all these things, and then I bought the house, and I have the nice car or the 2 cars or whatever your measurement of success is, and then they get to this point where they're in their 30s, 40s, or maybe even at 50, and they're looking back and going, I ticked all the boxes and I'm still not feeling happy or fulfilled.
Now?
Maybe what now, or is this the way the rest of my life looks, right? And I think that when you can start to make decisions based on, okay, how is this adding value both to my organization or to society, and then also how is this adding to me? Because you can just give, and eventually, because there'll always be people who will take, and that's how you have these codependent relationships, right? There's this very it's not a healthy balance, as you say, and so that's why if you can keep this balance between, you know, I feel like I'm contributing in a way that I want to be contributing, because look, I can be part of an organization and manage a sales team or be a salesperson for the rest of my life and probably add value in terms of shareholder value and growing profits and so on. But you get to a point where, sure, I can do that, but I that's not the only way that it can contribute value in the world. In my life, in other people's lives, right? So that's why always finding this balance between, you know, I've been thinking about maybe I'd like to start coaching young people, you know, kind of 16 to 20-year-olds who are trying to figure out because I think if at that age, if I had someone who could help show me my own potential and you know, help me orient myself in life, maybe. You know, and I don't actually have any regrets. I think everything that I've done in my life so far has gotten me where I am, and I'm pretty happy with where I am. But for people who aren't happy with it, where they are, because maybe they've taken all these, you know, external cues on the right choices in life, and then they didn't follow their own kind of needs and desires, the things that was going to add value to them, right? And so finding that balance between those two things is important, and really evaluating what does it mean to add value, right? What does it mean? Is it just to meet the commercial objectives? You know, you can see a real difference in CEOs in the world that want to equally, you know, address the shareholders. That's legitimate. That's the business model, but also want to make a positive impact on the world. I don't think, you know, I don't think Elon Musk is motivated about, you know, to be a billionaire. I don't think that's his main motivation. And not saying that his way is the one right way, but, you know, he obviously has the ways that he feels he can add value. He wants to have sustainable energy. He believes that, you know, being a multi-planetary species is important. So he feels he's adding value that way. And I'm not going to make a judgment call on whether that's right or wrong, but that's why it's everyone's own, you know, prerogative to choose how they think they can most add value and what they can most do. And the people that are selfish in the terms I think you were pointing to, that are like, how can I get more money, more luxury, more, you know, things to show the world how great I am. Those people tend to be the least fulfilled and the least happy in life. You know, I may not be happy, but I can buy the yacht that can sail right up to happiness and say hello. That's a quote from David Lee Roth, I think. dating back to my day, something like that. So it's just things like that to go, okay, well, you know, I've earned my first million, or I've earned, you know, and then is that really adding value to my life, and am I adding value to other people's lives? I think if this is the thing I want to emphasize, and I'd love to get feedback and commentary on people's own experiences, because, you know, I've doing the coaching is very, very rewarding for me. I do other things as well, especially during COVID, where a lot of the workshops and so on haven't happened, and those have also been fulfilling things, and I think I've still added value. But it's not just solely this one thing, and so I'm open to knowing that I can do different things to add value to people and organizations, and also to my own life. But I'm no longer satisfied with the fear, can I pay my mortgage, and can I, and I find the more that I live my life based on values, like adding value, that model of how do I add value, or that question, how am I adding value? I find the more success I find. The more I approach life in that way, the more success I find. And instead of going, okay, I need to earn this amount in order to have all these things that I want, and to do all these things that I want, and I'm never stopping to question, how are these things actually adding value to me, or how are the things that I'm doing actually adding value to others? So I think those are when you talk about the selfishness, the one of just I gotta have. That's being selfish to others, I think, or not in all cases, but also not healthy for yourself, because you're maybe asking yourself the wrong questions, and that's when you're going to get on your deathbed and go, well, yeah, I work these 60, 70-hour weeks, but boy, do I have a lot of money in the bank, and wow, what a great house I have, and sure, I've had some beautiful partners, but they were transient. But boy, did I have some great looking partners, or those are the things that we realize that as we get on later in life that are shallow or aren't fulfilling, and at the end of the day are not adding value. And that's not to say beautiful people can't add value. And so don't misunderstand. I think if you've got this ideal life on Instagram, that may not be ideal. But if you've got an ideal life where you're waking up every morning going, wow, what another great day, and I'm so fortunate, and I love where I live, and I love the person that's in my life, or the people that are in my life, and they love me, and then you can start to sense that I'm adding value, I'm getting value back, and so that's the point I'm making.
Yeah, sure. And it goes back to this frequent discussion point of how do you define success, and what does that mean for you, right? And just having that kind of clarity, what's important to you, and you don't even have to measure it. I think that was really important what you said, like, how do you measure things? And is it through my bank account, or my dad used to joke and say, whoever has the most toys when you die, he wins, right? Very, humoristic, materialistic point of view. But this affectionate, or this emotional kind of bank account, that you can't measure that. It's just a feeling, and how I feel that this is contributing or adding value to my life or to someone else's life, etc. So yeah, I think that's it. It's really important to think about that. Yeah, how do you define what's important for you? How do you define success for yourself, and what's adding value in that sense? And what is your commitment as well? I was thinking about that when you mentioned about coaching youngsters. Look at the teaching occupation. That as I can think back to my childhood when I was a student. Think about some teachers that were really, really influential, inspired me in great ways. What a fantastic way to add value to other people's lives.
Those are the people.
It's not the most well-paid the job that you're gonna have, but wow, is it important in adding value to other people's lives, and shaping the future of our societies? Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you there, but think about it. Teachers are some of the people we remember most through our lifetimes, right? Those teachers that were impactful for us. So I'm sure everybody has one of those people, whether it's a teacher or a mentor, someone, or a coach, like a sports coach or whatever, will have that person that really impacted our lives in a way, as you say, that may not have been financially rewarded. But sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there.
No worries. And also this idea about community work, or how do you this this comes back a little bit to I did a I think I mentioned that to you a few times. I did this course in theory U or U theory, and they really there it becomes very clear for this in this theory for things to emerge. It doesn't need to be set things in plan, but it's so important to create these kind of well, circles or communities of practice. I mean, the community work to getting people together with different perspectives and doing things that will have a beneficial effect on the society or on the planet in one way without a clear agenda. It doesn't have to be a clear agenda. We're going to do this, but just there's things will emerge if you put people together. And for me, this concept is becoming more and more interesting to see. You know, how can we contribute? And I think that there's a real genuine interest from a lot of people, and maybe especially the younger generation now, to be a part of these kind of things. I mean, if you're looking at organizations, now we've talked about the importance of purpose before, but one of the reasons why that's important, I mean, from a motivational perspective, but it's also a generational perspective. People want to be involved in something that is adding value, that is doing good. As you mentioned before, it's clearly not enough to break the stock record or whatever financial success you must have. There needs to be a bigger purpose. These purpose-driven organizations are really, I mean, in the hot space right now. So people are wanting and looking actively to think about how can I contribute through my work, through my choices, what I'm doing. And it's just interesting to see how that is reshaping the whole structure around work and career paths right now. And looking at how organizations are getting organized at this vertical assessment, or the vertical ascendant might not be there so much anymore. But so from that perspective, how can I contribute on a more horizontal level? How can I create opportunities with other people? And I might not be able to do a career in that sense and earning more and more money all the time, but I can fulfill other value adding things in my life through my work and doing other stuff. And I think community work really comes into place there.
Absolutely. And I think I'm glad you posed it as a question, because, this is the thing that I think helps us orient ourselves when we start asking things like, what's the contribution I'm making, or how can I add value? How can I make an impact? How can I, and what will the result be? So how can I do something, and what will the result be? And I think it's a really positive evolution of our approach, our rethinking of work in terms of this next generation that's looking for more purpose-driven organizations. Naturally, there are still going to be people who are like, well, I just want security and so on. And I think the teacher example is a really great one. My brother's wife is a teacher, and she is incredibly committed to, she teaches elementary school. So, I think her kids are grades 2 and 3. But, she's invested a ton of time. When I visit them, she'll be in the evenings, putting things together. And I think the teachers that really have that commitment, because they really are passionate about what they do, they are adding value to kids, our most valuable resource, right, in society. And also, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't feel fulfilled through that work, right? And then you have, probably there's a certain segment of teachers that are like, yeah, it's a secure job and I get lots of vacation, right? So I was, I was talking to some friends. This week they have 4 kids, and they were talking about. Actually, he was talking about his son was thinking about, and they come from a teaching family. So her parents are from. They were both in the school system. He was a principal, and I can't remember what his partner was, but they were really encouraging when his oldest son was thinking about, he's 19, trying to figure out his path in life, maybe teaching. And then his father was like, no, I don't think you'd be a good teacher because the kids would love you, but you might not push them or challenge them or engage them in a way. It would be more comfortable. And so really objective for him to say to say that about his son, but wanting to give a real sincere and for me, this is the whole conversation about adding value. Do the job that you think you can not only be best at, but also where you can make the biggest contribution, right? And so, especially in the teaching profession, we need more of those teachers who really look at it in terms of adding value and really being passionate about what they do, and in return, they're not getting the big paycheck, but they find the work so incredibly rewarding, and that adds value to them. And there we go again. This is the circle of adding value, giving, receiving, giving, receiving. And I think this is so important, and especially in times and an environment where there's a high degree of nihilism. People are feeling like things are hopeless, and what's the point? And so on. And that's where people become really selfish, right? When they think, well, it's hopeless anyway, I might as well get what I can when I can. And that's where a lot of we talked about corruption in the cooperation thing. That's where a lot of that comes from, where it's like, well, the planet's going to shit anyway. We're gonna, I might as well just take it while I can and enjoy what I can at the expense of whoever, and not thinking things through. And I think when the antidote to a lot of that nihilism is to look, there are still ways I can add value, and and if everybody takes that approach, the world will be a better place. Whether you're passionate about the environment or passionate about social justice or equality or stopping poverty, or like the organization I work with to rescue dogs. That's how they think they're adding value. And we can debate about whether certain things add value or not, but at the end of the day, you're giving something of yourself, and you're always going to get something in return for that. So if we looked more at that question, I think the world would be a better place, our societies would be better, and so on.
And also, another thought that crossed my mind now, and I think it came from the question that we stated, how can I add value in this situation? I think I mentioned before this idea about staying above the line or being below the line as a mindset that is really important for me. And I'm just thinking, in any kind of situation, I mean, we're talking about for instance, the job context, what kind of work you're choosing or whatever. But in any kind of situation, just thinking about, okay, so I'm in a situation now, and I have a choice. So just thinking about how can I add value to this situation? What does that mean? Does that mean maybe speaking up or asking a question or not agreeing or taking a vote or walking out the door? That whatever you do is I think about, okay, what adds value in this situation? And maybe that's it's not pragmatic to have that thought in mind 24/7 all the time. But when you find yourself in these kind of situations, when you're feeling a little bit unsure, that's maybe a sort of a good wake-up call to think about, okay, so I have a choice now. How could I add value to this situation? What's important for me? What's a good decision to take now? So that's something that I'm taking away from this, to have that question in mind in these kind of situations when you're a little bit unsure about things. Okay, well, stop. What adds value? And maybe it's as simple as just raising a point that you wouldn't raise otherwise. If we're talking about going back to the topic from last time, we're talking about what creates this kind of true cooperation, or well, it's about accountability. So okay, how can you
holding yourself accountable?
Yeah, holding yourself accountable, but also maybe holding others accountable. So, well, what do you mean? Just
challenging it.
I mean, it can be different things, but asking questions, constructively challenging things, but making an active choice about, okay, what's the value-adding thing to do right here, or to say right here.
Absolutely. I like your point about, about the choice. It is recognizing in every moment we have these choices, right? And then you can use this whole concept of adding value as your compass to help steer you through life. And so there will be people who are very passionate about a certain topic, but their actions are not adding value. They're virtue signaling, or they're just trying to tear someone else down. They're not looking for justice. They're looking for retribution and so on. So those are also times where it's like, is what I'm doing here really adding value? If I'm just trying to get someone canceled, or if I'm just trying to promote myself because I want to make myself look good. So I'm trying to say the right things, but you don't see them reflected in my behavior. That inauthentic approach to that's not really adding value. But as you say, if you hear people, whether it's like, say it's some form of discrimination, and you speak up, and those are actually your convictions, that is definitely adding value. So you're right. It could be the little choices we make in every day that will contribute to a better society, a better organization, and better situation, hopefully for someone else, but also ultimately for yourself. So, and I guess another industry I can point towards, or another profession, we look at the financial sector, which kind of popped into my head for some, I don't know, random reason. But we see a lot of these, whatever, we hear about hedge fund managers, we hear about Wall Street, we hear about, and we have this picture of people who are only about profits, and there's this impression of selfishness. But there's also there is a lot of investment into things. There are a lot of ethical funds now, and there are a lot of people that are trying to channel their financial wealth, or whatever contribution they can make, into projects that are going to make the world a better place, at least in their view. And then there are things like microloans, which have helped women become entrepreneurs, or in impoverished countries, or where they a normal bank would only give a man a loan, but now as women they can, and so these are little things that are actually massively changing society. And I think so you can whether it's teaching, or there is no industry that you're in that cannot have a paradigm shift in by way of looking at how can you add value rather than only the bottom line and only how we can deliver profits. So I think this shift to this generation that's pushing us to be more purpose-driven, and consumer demand drives our market economy. So if consumers also make there again, you come down to choices, because I believe whether you're at the grocery store or whatever, everything gets scanned in, and each of those scans is like a vote for that. You're voting for that thing. That's why, if you buy organic, if you can afford to, and you can, you're voting for, more, organic or more ethical products, and so every choice you make, your choices can also add value. And I hadn't even thought about it in that way until you brought it up, that our choices really can add value to other people's lives and to ourselves. And there are so many choices we have in every given moment. So taking the time to reflect on that. And I know people have their own problems and concerns, and it's hard to think about this stuff. But when you get in a habit of it, it really... it could be part of the solution for you, right? Being part of the solution rather than focusing on the problem and talking about what you don't want. You're focusing on what you do want and focusing on the solution. I've heard many years ago this anecdote about Mother Teresa, that she apparently said, I won't go to an anti-war rally, but if you have a peace rally, I'm there, right? I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it's just things like that, because these days we have so many anti this and against this and the war on, and I think if we can shift our attitudes and our emphasis and our energy towards what we're trying to achieve rather than what we're trying to stop, I think that's another area where we can add way more value, taking that approach to things. And I mean, in organizations as well, they talk so much about the problem, and you know, I frequently bring up Einstein's quote about, you know, the thinking that created the problem is not the same thinking that can create the solution, or something to that regard. And so I think these are just important tips and things that we can remember and focus on to start help finding solutions and really start to live our lives in ways where we're adding value and we're receiving a lot of value in return.
Yeah, and that's something that I enjoy very much about coaching, is that you always get that opportunity to look at what the opportunities are, rather than just focusing on that problem. And that creates a lot of energy, but also the space for, you know, what is valuable, what creates value for me, and how can I, what kind of choices can I do to go in that direction.
And that can be very subjective, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, sure. And so it's interesting that how this conversation landed really on two different kind of levels of perspective. One is very micro, you know, like in every small choice that you do, but also this need to maybe sit down once in a while. And I think I do that every time. I mean, we could do a topic about this around New Year's or something, but you know, New Year's is always like a time for reflection and think about what's important in my life. And
for me as well,
yeah.
I try to do a vision board at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year. I think about what are the things I really want, and I create I try and find some visuals that reflect the things that I want in the coming year, and then I'll create a little digital vision board for myself. I'll put it on my phone. I actually have it as my on my screensaver, and then I tend to look at it regularly to remind myself these are the things that I want. So. And they will tend to be things that both add value to me and ideally add value to other people. So, and I think in my writing, this is where I want to spend some time on over the next 2 months, is to really spend some more time writing, and hopefully, you know, that adds value to others, but it certainly adds value to me. I find writing it's not only cathartic in that, you know, it helps me work through what I'm feeling and thinking about, but it helps me hopefully it challenges me to organize my thoughts in such a way that I can communicate and more benefit other people, hopefully.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm not big on writing, but whenever I do, I do recognize that you can sort of categorize your thoughts, and you can digest it, and you can summarize it in simple points. For me, it's more about doing PowerPoints, but I think it's...
However you can add value, there's no one right way, Toby.
I guess.
But look, just even the teaching that you do, like any teachers have the opportunity to add value. So, I mean, we've already been through that. So anyway, maybe this is a good place to wrap things up, because I think we've talked a lot and we've covered some ground I wasn't necessarily expecting to, but I think there's a lot to chew on here and a lot to reflect on. And so maybe we'll leave people with that, with, you know, just the opportunity to reflect on ways that they're adding value to the world and how that also adds value to their own lives.
Yeah. So what kind of value-adding activities are you going to do today?
That's a good question. Well, I have some deliverables today, so I think getting those done on time will probably will probably add value to other people, yeah, I think I'm going to cook my girlfriend a nice dinner. I love to cook, so it's very rewarding for me. And I know she really appreciates, and like that appreciation adds so much value to my life. So, so yeah, it's, you know, I've got, obviously I've got the work related stuff, but that's a good point, because I might not ask on a day-to-day basis, okay, how is this adding value? But even though I've been so preoccupied with this topic for the last couple of months. So I think the big choices that I've made recently although it may not be obvious to everyone, but I think it in the end will be the right thing that adds value to all the stakeholders. And I think I'm hoping that me taking a step back over the next couple of weeks to reorient myself and make sure I'm living my life to add the most value, I think may not pay off to everybody immediately, but hopefully there will be people who benefit, and I will certainly benefit in the long run. So yeah, I probably, another thing I'll do today is spend some time contemplating this conversation. That's going to add some value, hopefully. All right. What about you? Are you you've got kids, so you're adding value every day.
I did think of, during our conversation, thought about something specific. I'm going to do a few things today that are value adding to myself, but I'm going to provide some constructive feedback to some stakeholders that I'm involved in. I'm not very satisfied with the situation, but I can add some value in the terms of providing constructive feedback so it becomes better for them. I mean, the situation is what it is, but for them in the future, they can improve a lot. So that's what I'm gonna do in a nice, constructive way.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's our challenge to everyone listening. Think about how you can add some value today, both to other people and to your own life. And as you make a habit of that, and I think you and I, Tobi, after today's conversation, are probably going to redouble our efforts to think about that more often. But yeah, just thinking, if not daily, just regularly about, okay, how is this adding value? And especially with new things you're going to bring into your life, or if you've got to choose between two things, asking yourself, well, I'm gonna binge watch this show. How is that adding value? Or I'm gonna listen to a really interesting podcast with these two bald guys that hopefully will. These are the choices we're going to make in life about adding value. Okay, on that note, before we digress too far off track, I want to thank everybody for listening, and hoping we've added some value through our conversation. Tobi, thanks again for joining me for another great topic. And in a couple of weeks, we'll do another one, and hopefully, most certainly, you'll come up with a great topic for us to chew through.
I'll think of something.
All right. Until then, take care, everyone. Hope you're adding value to your life, and we'll speak again soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.